Today I saw a tweet and it said March 30th is World Bipolar Day. And when I saw that, the first thing to arise in my mind was, yay, let's celebrate. And then I clicked on it and it was about reducing stigma and also about spreading awareness about the illness. And it was just interesting to me that I've created so much context for myself that when I saw World Bipolar Day, I immediately thought it was a celebration of people that have bipolar. Minus the word illness, minus the word disorder. Tom Wooten would say you can have bipolar in order. And I would say bipolar in order for what? To celebrate, to create, to appreciate beauty. And all the million things that I've talked about with myself. And I feel like spreading the message of bipolar as an illness actually just increases stigma, and I've been talking to myself about lots of other ways to think about it. And none of them are really true. They're just other frameworks to take into perspective, and ultimately it would be more about being it and living it and dancing with that energy, not thinking about it and trying to interpret it. And now that I'm doing this whole embodying mania thing, it's sort of moving towards that, moving towards just embodying, flowing with that energy that doesn't want to be structured and contained by the contortions of our thought structures that we've been given. So I might be one of the only people celebrating World Bipolar Day, but I'm celebrating it, and I'm celebrating it with this blue feather that I found. It's from a bluebird here. I don't know what the kind of bird is, but it has blue on it, and it's very friendly and cute. And he left me a feather today, so World Bipolar Day with a blue feather, yay! Let's celebrate all the aspects that aren't talked about and that are feared for fear of the aftermath. And if we can understand it, we don't necessarily have to be afraid of it. So I'll put this little blue feather on my head here. And one thing I haven't talked about yet that I noticed being on this Hearty Nutritionals is that I forget to have coffee. And then I eventually remember, but I realized that I forgot to have coffee. So it seems like I'm less inclined to just pour a cup of coffee and drink it. I still do, but it's just not the first thing I do, and I don't even really remember to drink it right away. And I'm still taking the Seroquel and extra trazodone, and it's making me feel rather slow and groggy and like I'm screwing up my words. But I'm determined to poison my brain into submission, into sleeping. And I can't remember when I started taking it, but I will stop at some point and hopefully I'll be able to sleep. If not, plan B is to continue taking it until I go to ECPR in mid-April, and then decide what to do after that. And here on World Bipolar Day, I would like to say, I would like to participate in setting manics free. We've been enchained by this paradigm of believing that we're ill. We do have some work to do in order to integrate this, but we're definitely not ill. And if we think we're ill, we're not going to move towards doing the work we need to do. And we can only set manics free if we work together. And luckily, most of us who went into mania felt at one point that we wanted to work together with people on something. So why not work together with fellow manics? Manics worldwide, manics around the world. Can we hold the frequency of mania? The other dimension is mania, is more energy. All it is more energy. And when we have that more energy animating us and moving through us, we don't know what to do with it. Well, we need to share it by working together. And I can say all this stuff because I've been there, and I can say all this stuff because I'm just a crazy person. And it's energy for no reason, as reason, motive, words, depletes energy. You know how it is in that state. We just play with energy for no reason. We don't have these motives driving us. And that's why I create lots of context and say it in lots of different ways. And it's been mainly a dialogue to myself. And even this is still just me talking to myself. It's just for fun. Because if I really had a motive to do something besides just be sort of playful and manic, well then that would go against the principles of mania itself. And I feel like I harvest insights in daily life and share them in self-dialogue. Maybe that's kind of my job for now. And I made up a word, mani-idea. So it's the word mania and idea, because it's an idea that comes from a manic mind, which has a different quality to it. It's sort of playful and wondering, and it's an insight that's not necessarily a fact when we all try and talk based on facts and opinions, and that's a boring game. There's no creativity in that. And part of this, speaking new context about map consciousness, mania, whatever you want to call it, is just to speak the nonsense as if it's possible. Because mania, again, is all about possibilities. Map consciousness is mapping possibilities, living in possibilities as possibility. Yet the language and the way we use language is very concrete and subject-object, and this is that, and that causes that. It's not very possibility-based, and so we're stuck in a structure of our own language. And I was thinking today how a computer program has certain language to understand how to use the interface. Well, we have the language of thought and subject, object, subject, verb, object. But what is the language of possibility? Because right now we have the interface of perceiving reality and understanding reality with these word structures that are actually outdated. So how do we speak in possibility and then start to see possibility? And I remember when I first was in so-called mania, I was trying to create new language and new words. And I'm reading this book by David Bohm, Wholeness in the Implicate Order. And chapter 2 is all about language, and he's talking about how we need to play with language and question the very language we use. And I haven't read the chapter yet. I've been talking a lot about beauty, and I definitely want to go into language. And how do we use language to point to beauty? So it's a language and speaking in terms of possible nonsense. And maybe we start to sense the possible. We have this possible sense. Maybe that's one of our senses, is the sense of possibility. And that's something that gets activated in map consciousness. We sense possibilities and move towards them. And when it gets messed up, possibility becomes probable hospitalization. So how do we avoid these things? And one of the things is that it's a huge responsibility to be immense, or to be connected to the immensity of possibility. And our immenseness can become an immense mess, and quite quickly. And I feel like mania and so-called mental illness can be transformed into enlightenment, whatever that means. And I've been hearing this sound, and it sounds like an oscillating energy field, kind of like wow, wow, wow. And I remember it was still happening when I was back home, but I always thought it was the traffic noise. But it's still happening here, and I think it's actually just the sound of an energy field of some kind. And I was thinking about how thought is like an internal gesture, because somebody was telling me how when somebody speaks to them, they'll sort of tense up because of their thoughts. So in that way, thought is an internal gesture of tension that is preventing the fluid gestures that might happen if that wasn't going on. So it gets in the way of actual gestures. And it's the tension of the me, the programming, the need to be consistent. Those contrivances block the living thing that we are. And so our living nervous system is entrapped by these internal gestures of internal sounds and images that happen so quickly that they prevent the natural gesture of the body from happening, because it's reacting to a program as opposed to the living response that it would have if there was no programming there, which we don't even know what that is. But what it is probably is something like mania. And Krishnamurti said that meditation is unpremeditated art. And I was thinking that that sort of sounds like mania too, that extra energy. It's unpremeditated. We do without thinking. And at first it's very fluid and wonderful and loving, but at some point it turns off. So we don't quite have the art. So mania is this energy that allows for unpremeditated action, but we don't quite know the art of it. So part of what I want to figure out is the art of it, which is the living practice, which isn't even a practice because we're living. So the living of it, which can be seen as a practice, kind of. It's kind of the practice of being unpracticed, or unpremeditated, or uncontrived. So part of what I want to figure out is the mathematics and the language of this premeditation, and also the language and mathematics of a language that might allow for the brain to be freed from some of this. And I don't know if I can do that, but I'm looking at a few different things. And part of it is just the playful creation of some language. And also I want to find out the math of several manic brains working together, starting with 2 and then possibly up to 6. So 6 people moving together in the same way, and I think this is most possible with people who go into that living state, and what effect that'll have on consciousness. So in a way, that's even beyond the personal embodied mania experiment that I'm doing with myself. So how does that affect consciousness? And I wrote down that nature responds to silence and runs from thought. And I was thinking about the fly video I made where the flies wouldn't run away. They weren't afraid of me. And our thoughts push away beauty and nature. And our thoughts push away nature in that we cannot see beauty as thought is not beauty. And then I was actually thinking just now that our thoughts literally push away nature and beauty because we're fixated on something we're thinking about, which is not nature or beauty. And even if it was, just abstracting about nature or beauty is not beauty. It's an abstraction about it. It's not contact with it. So it actually does push nature out of our perceptual field. in favor of human constructs. I feel like as a manic, it's important to put thought in its proper place and have a silent mind, because mania is increased energy, so it's going to increase the energy of thoughts, and it increases the information coming in, which can then amp up thinking, because it amps up whatever is already in the brain. But if the mind is silent and one is seeing beauty, then it really just amps up the beauty. And I think there's some trouble with that too as well, because it's hard to exist in the thought structures of society. And I'm finding lately that usually I can stay very present in the moment and listen to what someone is saying. But I find if there's like a group talking and somebody's talking about their me structure and something about that, or their past, something that's not present, my mind actually diverts to looking out the window at a hummingbird or something. It's almost so attuned to beauty that listening to somebody's bit about something isn't that interesting. So I'm watching that to see what happens with that, because it feels weird for my mind to wander away from the present. And I wrote down that when awareness sees the machinery of thought, it choicelessly looks at beauty with the actual eyes in the perceptual field of the present moment. And I work with the universe as an action of it. I work for the universe. And I wonder if I can move from explanation in terms of explaining context to myself about map consciousness and trans consciousness to possibility. So from explanation to possibility. And with that, I might start sounding even crazier than I've already sounded, because speaking in terms of possibility, it might sound like I've already been speaking in possibility, like this context is possible, this context is possible. But that's not really possibility, because it's still overlaying context on experience. Whereas possibility, speaking in possibility, is speaking in the possibilities that I see, which aren't actual and they haven't happened yet. So there's going to be a mixture of that now, I think. I don't know. Or maybe it'll just be starting to talk about the language of that. So part of it is I've created context for myself in terms of stuff related to map consciousness, whether it's so-called mania or so-called psychosis or whatever. And I've already said that it seems that that has helped to keep me safe from myself, from pathologizing myself, from turning myself into the mental health authorities after having a really bad experience in the psych ward. And so the next part is creating the language of possibility and then starting to speak in possibility. So to live in possibility, now that I've created the safety of context somewhat, and I haven't finished yet, I probably have more to go on, but I have catching up to do. So I was thinking about some of the language of possibility. So I might say, it is possible that, or it seems possible that, it may be possible that, and in a way, in wishing something to be possible, may it be possible that. And so maybe in a way replaces to be. Because to be is it is, I am. Whereas maybe is sort of maybe logic, which Robert Anton Wilson talks a lot about. And then taking it further, getting rid of the it. Instead of saying it may be possible that, just say may be possible that. Because what is the it? There's no it. And another step further would be to say may being possible that, or seeming possible that. And I see it's possible goes to seeing possible that. And instead of saying I saw it was possible, saying, seeing to possible that. And a way to see a possibility and want it to happen in the future is see willing possible that. And see willing, speaking of the future, sounds kind of nice. And it also sounds like I'm willing to see this in the future, and it also sounds like I'm willing this possible future into being. It's like saying I'm willing to see this in the future. And in a way, it makes the future sound more as a possibility than an actuality. Because when we're thinking about goals and wanting to achieve a certain goal, we're making it seem like we're going to get that goal, and then it closes us off to seeing other possibilities. Whereas if we're talking about the future in terms of throwing possibilities out there, seeding possibilities, then it gives a different quality to it. And in the way we're speaking, it almost attributes some of what comes into being as the way we speak. Whereas we usually think that language has no effect on anything, really, like it's benign. And changing language slightly is saying that it's not benign, and the way we use language is using us. And it's been used in this sort of viral nature to make us think that we're separate objects apart from other objects and that we're not related. So this language too is partially relating things to each other. In terms of, if I say I'm willing to see this in the future, or see willing possibility, then it's my relationship to that possibility. And also knowing that by saying it, it's going to make it more salient for me to pick out things to make that possible. So part of the responsibility goes into the creation of language, how language is created and how it creates through us. So part of it is willing this possibility into manifestation, putting some energy towards it. And part of it too is that by saying it in this possible way, we have to have the eyes to see it. And we also have to have the heart and being to bring it into manifestation through us. Even if it's not us exactly who does that thing. It could be somebody else who creates that. But when we say that we're willing to see it as a possibility, when it is possible, when it has been made possible, then we will see it more so than if we're thinking about other things. So rewriting and replaying with language is definitely something a manic would do. It's something I did before I was diagnosed with anything called bipolar. So I'm getting back to the harvest, which isn't just harvesting the mania, but actually getting back with the process by which my brain was working in that state. And part of it is creating new modes of communication, living modes of communication, diverting towards life instead of thought structures. And I've been living that here. I'm always, if there's something alive with me, I participate with it. I don't think, oh, I should be over here reading a book. So not thinking, oh, I have this other mechanical thing to do, and this living thing doesn't serve my purpose in my thought structure, so I'm not going to engage. So yeah, I have lots of catching up to do, talking to myself. I'm not sure at what rate I will do it. Thanks for listening to this profoundly crazy stuff.